No bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
A very busy show tonight. My big opinion is a response to having the C word used about me by a high-profile comedian. You won't want to miss that in 3 minutes' time. My Mark Meets guest is a legend, renowned NHS cardiologist Asim Malhotra. We'll talk about heart health, losing weight, and we'll have a look at whether the NHS can recover from this pandemic. In the big question, should Donald Trump be brought in to help Joe Biden with the Ukraine situation? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including a close pal of Joe Biden, Democratic strategist Bob Mulholland. Plus, my alternative news headlines tonight featuring Vladimir Putin, Rod Stewart, Joe Wicks and the Spice Girls. We've got another great British game show as well, and helping me react to the big stories of the day are my all-star panel, radio and Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry, the brilliant comedian and now published children's author Francine Lewis, and broadcaster and commentator Albi Amankona. So who dropped the C-bomb in my direction? Find out straight after the headlines with Miranda.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has told Ukraine's president that Vladimir Putin's barbaric actions are testing not just Ukraine, but all of humanity. During a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Prime Minister said the UK would continue to pursue more options to bolster Ukraine's self-defence. Earlier, Mr. Zelensky visited wounded soldiers in hospital and presented them with medals. A Russian airstrike has hit a large Ukrainian military base close to Poland, killing at least 35 people and wounding 134. Russia admits to carrying out the attack, which took place less than 15 miles from the Polish border. The Kremlin claims it destroyed a large amount of weapons supplied by outside nations. An American journalist has been shot and killed in the Ukrainian town of Irpin near the capital Kiev. 50-year-old Brent Renault had previously worked for the New York Times but was not on assignment for them in Ukraine. The Times called Mr. Renault a talented filmmaker. A Russian delegate involved in the peace talks with Ukrainian officials says progress has been made in the latest round of discussions and they could soon reach a joint position. A member of the Ukrainian delegation also said there could be results in the coming days. It's not known what any agreement might include, but Ukraine has said while it's willing to negotiate, it won't surrender or accept ultimatums. Well, it's believed 125,000 people have now been evacuated via humanitarian corridors across Ukraine. That's according to Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking in his latest video address. The Ukrainian president stressed the key task is still Mariupol, where 400,000 people remain trapped. A convoy carrying food and medical supplies has been dispatched to the besieged port city.
Russia has lost thousands of items of military equipment. They've lost 74 planes and 86 helicopters. We know they have more, but we also know that we will keep defending. Ukraine is not surrendering. Servicemen are not surrendering. The people are not surrendering.
Meanwhile, the Chancellor has urged British businesses to think very carefully about investments in Russia that would support Putin's regime. Rishi Sunak has welcomed moves by companies like BP and Shell, who've already pledged to move away from holding assets in the country. He also argues there's no case for any new investment in Russia. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
It is Sunday, March the 13th. You're watching and listening to Mark Dolan Tonight. My big opinion is a response to having the C word, that's right, the C word, used about me by a high-profile comedian. You won't want to miss why in just 3 minutes' time. My Mark Meets guest is renowned NHS cardiologist Asim Malhotra. This guy's amazing. We'll talk about heart health, how we can lose weight successfully, plus we'll have a look at whether the NHS can recover from this pandemic and why the pharmaceutical industry have so much influence in our politics as well as our health service. Plus, we'll talk about the vaccine too. Dr. Asim Malhotra is live just after 10 o'clock. In a big question, should Donald Trump be brought in to help Joe Biden with the Ukraine situation? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including a personal friend of Donald Trump's, popular US radio host Sebastian Gorka, and a close pal of Joe Biden, US commentator Bob Mulholland. It's the US political all-stars tonight. We've also got my alternative news headlines tonight featuring Vladimir Putin, Rod Stewart, Joe Wicks, and the Spice Girls. We've also got another great British game show and helping me react to the big stories of the day. And we've got some fabulous talking points on my all-star panel. Radio and Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry, the fantastic comedian and now published children's author Francine Lewis, and broadcaster and commentator Albi Amankona. As ever, do drop me a line throughout the show, mark@gbnews.uk. And tonight we're going to do something very special. We're going to begin a tradition on a Sunday night, Sunday selfies. Because this week I met Penelope. Take a look at this. Zoe, can you get that image? Isn't Penelope gorgeous? She grabbed me, she manhandled me on the street and said, "Are you the Mark Dolan? I love GB News," she said, and she promised that she'd be watching tonight. Every day I meet people that love GB News. We are changing the world together, one show at a time. So tell your friends, tell your family, and tonight I want to get to know you. I want to see you. So would you send me your Sunday selfies? Maybe you're watching the show, maybe you're having dinner, chilling out with a beer. Like these two, Tatiana, my brilliant producer, organised these photos in advance. There's a couple of gorgeous members of Tatiana's family, and let's have a look at a couple more as well. I think we've got one more, haven't we? Let's have a look at this. That's Tatiana, my producer's gorgeous mum, and her stepdad. So that's how it's done. Do send in your Sunday selfies. I just want to say hi. So, lots to get through, and don't forget, it is a busy 2 hours. We don't do boring, not on my watch. So, fire up the kettle, tear open the custard creams, and let's get to work. I just want to talk to you about something quite briefly that happened this weekend, and I think it's significant. This is a message on Twitter, slightly tongue-in-cheek, that I sent out publicising Friday's show. Take a look at this tweet. I used an image of female biology from a kind of, school textbook. And the tweet said, "I will be defining what a woman is this evening on GB News at 9 p.m. See you then." That was my tweet. It was in response to shadow cabinet ministers in the Labour Party this week being unable to define what a woman is. Both politicians are women, by the way, or maybe we should be calling them cis women now. They were Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who said that answering that question was a rabbit hole. Is it? Is defining a biological woman a rabbit hole? OK. And Annalise Dodds, the Shadow Equalities Minister, also gave a strange answer. She said, well, really, there needs to be a context if you're going to define what a woman is. Take a listen.
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is. I mean, you look at the definition within the Equality Act, and I think it just says someone who is adult and female, I think, but then doesn't say how you define either of those things. I think it does depend what the context is, surely. I mean, surely that is important.
Context? Why do you need a context? There was no context needed by my mother when she gave birth to me, or when yours gave birth to you. What is a woman? It can't be that hard a question, can it? Surely politicians have to face tougher questions than that one. We're actually taught it at school what a woman is, for now anyway. My tweet achieved plenty of engagement. This one was typical from Lola, who said, "Thank you, Mark," with a round of applause. And this one from Greg, who said the following: "The fact that you need to define what a woman is on TV in 2022 speaks volumes about the society we live in." Couldn't agree more. Well, I guess I'm in pretty good company, given that the world's greatest living author, J.K. Rowling, has used her platform not to attack trans people, whose journey to be who they are is an important and joyous one that must be celebrated and protected, but simply to uphold the basic facts of biology and to enforce the integrity and competitiveness of female sport and practical but important considerations like female-only spaces. Nothing too controversial, you would think. However, there has been pushback to my slightly tongue-in-cheek tweet from the talented comedian Rosie Jones, with whom I've worked. I'm a huge fan. She tweeted the following: "If anybody wants to see what a C word looks like, tune in to GB News at 9 p.m. Very strong language, that, isn't it? Would that count as abuse? I think it's heading in that direction. Is the C word violent language, do you think? Is it trolling? You tell me. Surprising that it came from Miss Jones, who tweeted just this recently: "Happy Sunday, stop online abuse." Except that she used the C word with me. I'm so confused. I agree with that tweet about stopping online abuse. There should be no abuse online. What a shame that Rosie doesn't agree with herself. What she chose to call me tops the list of the most serious swear words. Is it violent language? Is it threatening me in some way? Is it abuse? Well, you tell me. Of course, this kind of vicious trolling is all too familiar from the so-called Be Nice Brigade, who are anything but, and are often responsible for some of the nastiest discourse out there. Now, Rosie's not like that. She is a colossal talent and she deserves no pile-on. And yes, it was a harsh joke, but a joke just the same. But I'm both a current affairs broadcaster and a comedian, and a heckle deserves a put down. I'll just say it like it is, folks, if you'll forgive me. Unlike so many politicians, for me, this isn't difficult. Trans rights are of massive importance, and I'm the biggest trans supporter out there, with close friends who have taken that wonderful journey. I interviewed Dennis Avner, a remarkable chap, the so-called Cat Man. He was part of a documentary series I made for Channel 4. He identified as a feline. It's not a joke. He really, really felt that in his soul that he was a cat. And do you know something? He had my love and support and respect too, because for him it was real and it was his journey. But I push back on the need for biological women to now call themselves a cis woman. And I push back on somebody born male beating fellow female athletes in a sporting environment. A view shared by the most famous trans woman in the world, Caitlyn Jenner, a heroine of mine, who has hilariously been called transphobic, in particular by non-trans people. Explain that one to me. And I push back on erasing the identity and biology of any human born with XX chromosomes, or in other words, a woman. Transphobia and attacks on trans people are as twisted and evil as racism or homophobia. We must acknowledge, support and respect anyone that wants to identify as female, a trans woman, absolutely, but not at the expense of women born women and the rights that they have fought for centuries to achieve. I'm not sure that I am a C word, to be honest. I hope I'm not a C word. I wonder if I might be a feminist. Who knows? As a bloke, it's not for me to say. I will let women judge me. This particular swear word, the C word, is extremely strong language, though, isn't it? Is it abuse? Is it violent? Well, you tell me. But if it's designed to make me afraid or to shut me up, be clear, it will have the opposite effect. Because whatever the anatomy of a woman, let me reassure you, I've got a pair of balls. And I've got a ballsy panel tonight reacting to the big stories of the day. 3 pals of mine. Albie Amankona, political commentator and broadcaster. Fantastic to have Albie with us tonight. Francine Lewis, comedian, TV presenter, model, and now children's author. And what can you say about Mike Parry? Radio and Fleet Street legend, and now a major TV star as well. Great to have all three of you with me. Francine, let's talk about this. I don't think we need to get back into the what is a woman debate. It's been had on many shows across the last few days. But what about the idea of this kind of online discourse? Why do we have to be so nasty?
I think the C word is a very nasty word, personally. To kids, it's not. It seems to be a word they use very loosely nowadays, and it doesn't seem to be, for them, a bad swear word. I mean, kids are using it constantly, and I can't stand this word. You know, I say, no matter what swear words are used in the house, that is definitely not a swear word I will accept. And I think anybody going online using a word like that is definitely online abuse. It's absolutely horrendous that somebody would say that about you or anybody. So to me, it's very hurtful and it's definitely a disgusting word.
I mean, Albie, there's definitely more than a hint of hypocrisy in that tweet, isn't there, from somebody that previously said no online abuse?
Absolutely, Mark. I mean, it's always these, I call them the Be Kind Brigade, who are always the most rude and horrible to people who just happen to disagree with them. And I think we really do need to get back to a discourse, whether or not that's on Twitter or in real life, where we just respect each other's differences and respect our different opinions and just try and find a positive way forward. Because I bet that you and Rosie probably have a great deal in common. You've spoken very positively about her tonight. So instead of focusing on people's differences, if we focus on what we had in common, I'm sure we'd all get on much better.
Yes, I mean, of course, Mike Parry, you'll have heard language like that, if not worse, in Fleet Street. But what's your reaction to this story?
I've been called much worse things than that, believe it or not, Mark. There are even worse words in the world. My reaction to the story is, and you and I have talked about this before, free speech is only free speech to those who dictate about free speech, providing that your freedom to speak is what they agree with. But your freedom to speak is, if you don't give them the views that they like and they endorse, it's not free speech anymore. It's dictatorial, and you should be banned and rubbish. Now, using the C word, and Francine, who is sitting on my right here, encapsulates exactly what I think. I hate that word. It's so disgusting that I've never used it myself. I won't accept anybody who uses it in my direction. Every time I get it on Twitter, you get it a lot, bang, you're blocked, and I never want to speak to you again or hear from you again. Don't these people realise, including this woman who's attacked you, that if they just used their intelligence, because they've got lots of intelligence usually, and if they tried to argue the point they want to make realistically with lovely words of which the English language is full of, they would get a much better response from you, and they'd be much better able to get their opinion over, because the minute they use the C word, as far as I'm concerned, bang, the shutter comes down, and they're not worth talking to.
And it seems to me, Mike, that we've had this with Brexit, we've had it during the pandemic, that if you disagree with me, you're automatically the enemy and you're automatically a bad person.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that as well. And, you know, the amazing thing is, in the crisis we're in at the moment with Ukraine and all that, you still got people who are trying to literally defend the situation that it was all NATO's fault. You know, it's all down to the fact that the West want to protect itself and their borders. And this is part of the whole argument. If you argue against that, you're a nationalist. And if you're a nationalist, you're a Brexiteer. And if you're a Brexiteer, you're a nasty, horrible person because you don't want to be a worldwide person. You want to be a little Englander or something like that. And now we're being able to focus on what the individual in our country and around the world want to be. They just want to be free within their own environment. Look at the people of Ukraine. They just want to be free.
Yes.
Look who's rescuing them, the people of Poland, who just want to be free. And so what I'm saying is, take all the abuse you want, Mark, but stick to your principles, because in my view, your principles, once they go, we're finished.
I completely agree with you. I mean, Albie, how do we deal with this toxic discourse that we've got, whether it's about Brexit, whether it's about going plant-based, whether it's net zero, the pandemic, or now Ukraine? How do we fix what I am now calling the age of intolerance?
I think it's going to be quite difficult, Mark, because we seem to have got ourselves into a position where people on all sides, if they disagree with each other, the first thing is that they insult each other. But I think with this particular story, you mentioned that Rosie was a comedian. Was this a joke? And I wonder whether or not, if it is a joke, do we just accept that if someone's making a joke about something, it's kind of off limits about being offended by it? Because your whole monologue and that whole tweet was about, there was a picture, a biological picture of a vagina there, and then she used a very rude swear word, which means the same thing. So, I mean, was it a joke? And if it was a joke, should you be offended by it?
Well, yeah, and that's a brilliant question, Albie. I mean, that's the point, and I was keen to draw attention to that in the monologue, Francine, that it was just a joke. If you want to see what a real C word looks like, watch GB News. It was an example of her excellent craft as a comedian, but it still was an attack, and it was still what I would consider aggressive or even abusive and violent language, I've got to say.
I agree with you. I just feel nowadays we cannot have an opinion. And especially on Twitter, you know, I feel like there's so many things, there's so many, views I want to voice my opinion, and I almost feel afraid to do that because people just want to attack you. You know, we don't all agree on everything, and we should be allowed to have our freedom of speech. You know, that's what debates are all about. You know, it would be a boring world if we all agreed on the same thing. And we shouldn't be allowed opinions without people verbally attacking us constantly. And I find this really, really tough. As being, somebody who has a profile, if we want to say something, we almost feel we can't. And in comedy, it's so difficult right now to go on the stage and think, oh, should I be saying this? Should I not be saying this? You know, I've been watching old reruns of the things I did, back in the late 90s, and I could say what I wanted. And that's when I was at my funniest. Now I feel it's very, very difficult because I'm so limited.
Well, you told me that you recently appeared on a big shiny floor ITV studio show, and they went through your set list and they said, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that.
It's ridiculous. And that's only since 2013 when I was on Britain's Got Talent, I was allowed to say what I wanted. And then a few years down the line, it was so hard to do a gag that was actually funny because everything had to be, everything was seen as, you can't say that because it's insulting to people from Newcastle. You can't say that because it's insulting for people who are overweight. I mean, it's ridiculous. But we need to be able to have fun and laugh at ourselves and, just be able to giggle and laugh without taking...
Porky?
I totally agree, but just very quickly on that, Francine.
Yeah, of course.
Just to play devil's advocate, using your argument entirely, why shouldn't it not be OK for Rosie to make that joke if it was a joke? If you're complaining that you weren't able to make jokes on ITV because it might offend people, she's made a joke. I think it was quite rude, but she still made a joke.
But
the nth degree of your argument...
May I come in there?
Isn't she just asking for the same thing?
In the political divide, right, the leftists and the left-wing sort of comedians and all that find it absolutely acceptable to be insulting, to be denigrating those who don't agree with them, to use foul language like the C word. I don't see anybody on the right using that sort of language. And you might think that, I'm clouded in my judgment, but those who are on the right do not use the sort of vile and abusive attacks on those who don't agree with what they say in the way that the leftists use against those who don't agree with them. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mark? I'm of the righteous persuasion. I make no argument. I'm conservative with a small c. But I still believe anybody who wants to disagree with me has the right to disagree with me without me calling that person the C word. Whereas I find, largely speaking, that when I come up against those of the leftist persuasion, they're very happy to pile as much abuse as they possibly want onto me just because I don't agree with them. And that is a fundamental fact. You look at social media and you'll see that that is exactly what happens in this country. If you think towards the right, centre-right, then you are abused horribly by those on the left. But it doesn't work the other way around.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, Mike. Albie, I consider myself centre ground. I'm just a liberal. I want the government to just get out of the way and let me get on with my life. I think you share a similar set of values. I think Francine and actually Mike will be on board with that as well. I think there are millions of people in Britain who are just in the centre ground that want the government to get the hell out of our lives. But Albie, is it true, is Mike right, that the so-called woke left are the most vicious in terms of going after their critics?
Yeah, they are.
And are they the ones who are behind cancel culture?
They're absolutely the ones that are behind cancel culture hugely. And cancel culture is something which I've been fighting against, since I was at university. I started one of the first free speech societies at a British university at the London School of Economics, exactly because I could see where cancel culture was going. And it was indeed the left that we were fighting. And it was actually fighting for people to come to LSE, comedians who they found offensive, and say, well, no, actually, we've got to let these people come on campus, make us laugh, maybe make us think about our views, and maybe we'll feel a bit uncomfortable about it. You know, life is all about decisions and it's all about experiences. And we can't live in these cotton wool worlds where we don't have any offence at all. That would just be ridiculous. And I just think the left, and especially people that are really hot on this cancel culture stuff, really need to get a grip, live in the real world, accept that sometimes they're going to be hurt, sometimes they're going to be upset, but most of the time they're going to be just fine, because that's how I've lived my life.
Brilliant conversation. It will continue with my fantastic panel in the news agenda at 9:45. We're going to speak to the friend of the show, brilliant Andre Walker, who's been to Ukraine this weekend to help out with the relief effort. Also next in the big question, should Joe Biden enlist the help of Donald Trump to secure a peace deal with Vladimir Putin? The poll's up now, so do vote on that. And get those Sunday selfies in. I want to get to know you better. I want to see you. I know you're gorgeous, so send your pics in now. Mark at gbnews.uk. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'll get to your emails and your selfies because we're doing Selfie Sunday on the show tonight. But first, it's time for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And let's talk about this. Vladimir Putin continues his appalling invasion of Ukraine. So should Joe Biden, US president, think the unthinkable and draft in the help and support of former President Donald Trump? Whilst in power, Trump reached out to figures like Kim Jong-un and Putin. So might the man behind the best-selling book, The Art of the Deal, be just the global figure to get a peace deal with Russia across the line? Should Biden reach out to Trump for help? Well, journalist and defence correspondent for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, joins us. I'm also delighted to be joined by a man who knows Donald Trump intimately well. Of course, he's a top talk show host in the United States and a former assistant and advisor to President Donald Trump, Sebastian Gorka. What do you think, Sebastian? Should Joe Biden make that call?
Well, absolutely, if we want the tragedy of the Russian invasion of Ukraine to stop, because there's one thing that's for sure, this war wouldn't even have happened if my former boss were in the White House. Just a reminder of what we did when we were there. We blocked the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We unleashed the U.S. energy sector so that we became a net exporter of oil, which really is the only way to hurt Putin. And when he was destabilizing Syria with hundreds of Russian contractors who are actually special forces officers, we killed them. President Trump told the Defense Department, kill those Russians destabilizing the Middle East. And in one operation, more than 200 Russians were killed by the Defense Department. What did Russia do? Nothing. Because Vladimir Putin, who is a thug, who is a murderer, was afraid of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump could stop this. But you know as well as I do, this administration calling up President Trump would be an admission of their catastrophic foreign policy.
And of course, Donald Trump called out Germany many years ago for their reliance on Russian gas. And at the time, German officials just laughed in his face.
Yeah, at 2018, I've used that clip on my daily show at least 3 times this week. He warned them at the United Nations saying, don't do it, stop funding Russia. And then the camera pans to the German delegation and they titter, they're laughing. They're not laughing anymore. We demanded, we said, if you're a serious member of NATO, at least keep your promise to spend 2% of GDP on defense. They said no. Well, guess what, Mark? Now they're doing it. Now they are even considering starting up their closed nuclear reactors. So this is what happens when you have no leadership in the White House. And remember this, President Trump just gave this speech. He is the only president in this century not to have witnessed Russia invade a neighbor under his watch. Under George W. Bush, it was Georgia. Under Obama, it was Crimea. Now, under Biden, it is the rest of the Ukraine. That is just a statement of historic fact.
Sebastian Gorka, we can't turn back time. More's the pity. We are where we are. What would Donald Trump do now if he was in the White House and the invasion had happened?
Well, I've recommended 4 things. I just wrote an article for the Heritage Foundation. Number 1, unleash the U.S. energy sector once more. The fracking, the shale, the oil refineries, the oil drilling on public lands must be brought back so that we don't have to go cap in hand to Venezuela, to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they're not even returning Biden's call. Nobody dared not return President Trump's call. So number 1, energy. Number 2, the troops that are in pointless places like Germany have to be relocated to frontline NATO nation states, to Poland, to Hungary, to the Baltics. And then the last 2 things that, God willing, are happening right now. We have to be arming the Ukrainians to the hilt when a neutral nation like Finland says we're going to arm Kiev. You know it's a sign. When Switzerland is being part of the sanctions as well, you know that people are turning, that the geopolitical jigsaw is being recalibrated. And lastly, because we have unparalleled intelligence capabilities, more military satellites than anybody else, we must be providing target sets, the target packets to Kiev so they can make the invading Russians bleed. Those four things together, and this war would stop like that, Mark.
Robert Fox, great to have you back on the programme. You are, of course, the defence editor of the world-famous London Evening Standard. Do you think that Donald Trump could use his skills in deal-making to actually reach out to Putin? Of course, Donald Trump did reach out to Putin when he was US president. He even reached out to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Well, let's take the first part of your question. Yeah, he could try to reach out to President Putin, as he has actually said. But what has been noted is that there has been a steady deterioration on President Putin's part, and this is with people who have dealt with him from his own entourage. He's losing touch with reality. We are hearing these rambling versions of history and why he was doing it, and he doesn't seem to be very good at explaining exactly why he is doing what he is doing to Ukraine, what he declared he was doing, that he wanted to take it back, that he was going to avoid civilian targets. Well, he's broken his word, and the operation ain't going too well. So what I'm saying is that he's operating in his own reality. And I think that even an attempt by Donald Trump to reach out to him wouldn't get terribly far. I think the one that most stands a chance, just a chance, as things stand, is President Xi Jinping of China. Because he is Russia's biggest client, or about to be Russia's biggest client for oil and gas. But I must say, I'm very pessimistic, because Putin is very bunkered at the moment. He seems to be fighting some of his own staff. He's fired, finally, his head of overseas intelligence, of external intelligence, of the FSB, put him under house arrest. And I think we're in for a bad couple of weeks. And we'd love to give diplomacy a chance, but I don't think it's got a hope in hell in the next few days.
And where do you think China are at with this invasion, Robert? We've heard mixed reports about how engaged they are with the Kremlin right now.
Well, the mixed reports are absolutely right, because their attitude seems to be extremely mixed. I don't mean to be funny here. They're being very, very ambivalent, because at first some people were saying that maybe this would be a playbook for a grab for Taiwan. Xi is much too fly to do it as crudely as that, and there were mild tut-tuts coming from Beijing when the thing kicked off, respecting the sovereignty of Ukraine. There's a problem for both of them, and I hope my fellow guest will comment on this, because I think it's a very important fact. One of the things that Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, in their autocracy, can I put it like that, their dictatorship, fear is insurgency, upset at home. That's why they cracked down on demonstrators left and right. But there's one thing that Ukraine has stood for, and was the first in the field, was with the colour revolutions. I'm not being funny here now. The Orange Revolution. And we know that Xi and Vlad the invader really fear something going wrong like that. Quickly, Putin's running out of manpower. He's got to get more. We've heard about the recruiting the mercenaries. You're quite right, the depiction of Syria we've heard from our colleague. He's trying to bring people from Syria. He's getting Chechens involved. They're trying to really ramp up to get the grunts from Belarus in. Have you looked on paper? Belarus has a tiny army, but it has a huge gang of over 120,000 gendarmerie. That means thugs who beat up demonstrators. But they're showing great reluctance to go in. The break point comes in 2 or 3 weeks when you have one of the twice a year conscription rounds. And if the conscription round comes up as the news about Ukraine is really getting out, I think he could be in real trouble. And there are signs of that already.
Sebastian Gorka, Robert Fox there, pointing out that the role of China will be pivotal, and Donald Trump's relationship with China whilst in office was none too good.
No, because he understood that China wanted to displace America as the most powerful nation in the world. They have a plan. It's called One Belt, One Road. They have a mode of warfare called unrestricted warfare, to use all means, economic, financial, intelligence, and otherwise. So President Trump finally realized that the elite was culpable in that in Washington, D.C. We're making money out of it from Google on down to various members of the political elite. And he stopped that and he declared a trade war on China. But the current marriage between Beijing and Moscow is a marriage of convenience because China wants to defeat Russia as well or become more powerful than Russia. Russia is in a demographic tailspin. It is a dying nation. The mortality for the average male is 68. They do not meet half, even reach 50% of the reproduction rate for sustaining the population. More than 100,000 Russians die every year. More than are born. So China has the manpower. China has the sheer numbers. But right now, Russia needs, Putin needs somebody to bail them out, whether it's picking up the slack from Visa and MasterCard, canceling operations in Russia, or anything else. So it is a temporary alliance, but don't be mistaken. China has its own intentions, its own plans, and it too wants to do an invasion akin to Ukraine. But in this case, it will be Taiwan, and it could be imminent.
Let me bring my panel in if I can. Sebastian, I know you have to run in a couple of minutes. We've got the broadcaster Mike Parry, the comedian Francine Lewis, and Albi Amankona, broadcaster and political commentator. Albi, do you think that a figure like Donald Trump would actually be dealing with Vladimir Putin more effectively? Would this have happened on Trump's watch?
We're never going to know whether or not this would have happened on Trump's watch. But all we can say about Donald Trump, all we know about, is his character. And I wonder whether or not his character, being quite boisterous, a real man's man, maybe less kind of a stickler for the rules, if you will, might have sort of spooked Putin a little bit, not into behaving this way. Because what we have in the West at the moment, for better or worse, are leaders who follow the rules. Even Boris Johnson is following the rules at the moment. And what we have in Russia is a leader who does not follow the rules. So perhaps if the leader of the free world was a man who didn't follow the rules, maybe Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. But that's not a question we're ever going to know the answer to. And I think Putin is so unpredictable, it would be unwise to think that Donald Trump was the medicine to the awful atrocities that we're seeing in Ukraine at the moment.
Francine Lewis, I'm sure you'd like Donald Trump back, not because you share his politics, but you could impersonate him in your brilliant comedy shows. But do you think that he demonstrated, whilst he was at the White House, a better ability to reach out to these monsters, to Kim Jong-un, to Putin and others?
Well, the thing is, it's such a delicate question because, you know, Donald Trump isn't in power at the moment. Biden is. And would we have benefited from him being in power at the moment? I don't know, because he, like Putin, is so unpredictable. You know, we don't know if, you know, him being in power would have meant that we would go into World War III right now. Because...
But Francine, was the invasion of Ukraine an example of Putin trying it on because he identified the weakness of President Joe Biden, who presided over our disastrous departure from Afghanistan?
Maybe yes, because obviously Donald Trump was a bit crazy like Putin himself, so maybe he wouldn't have gone as far, but we will never know that. I mean, the thing is, if Donald Trump had insisted on a no-fly zone, I mean, who knows what could have happened? It could have been even worse. I don't know.
Well,
so this is a very difficult question to answer.
But Francine Lewis has raised an interesting point, Mike Parry. You've got the slightly bonkers, unhinged but charismatic Donald Trump. We've got Putin, who is an enigma. Yeah. Maybe two wrongs would make a right. Maybe these two guys could get together, lock horns and sort this out.
Well, firstly, I don't accept that Donald Trump, President Trump, is unhinged. I just think that he's a very focused and specific man. And when I say that, he gave, it was either on a website or he gave an interview about 4 days ago in which he said, Putin would not have invaded if I was still president. Putin assured me in a telephone call after I became president of the United States that I had a conversation with him and he assured me he was not going to threaten the Western world. And that's because Donald Trump apparently said to him, or his ambassador, if you mess me around, Mr. Putin, I'm going to drop a bomb on Moscow. Now, that's what I call straight talking. He got to the core of the North Korean problem by straight talking with Kim Jong-un, by telling him, I've got a bigger red button on my desk, pal, than you've got on yours. And President Trump, by the way, was the first politician in the world to use direct speak, direct talk on Twitter. He didn't leave anybody under any illusion about what he meant and how he said what he would do would happen. And that became very clear. In 2017, when Donald Trump, who is a man who supports the right of the Western world and its freedoms, when he suddenly found chemical weapons being loaded upon the Syrian people by their own leader, Assad, he sent in a volley of 48 cruise missiles into Syria and said, don't do it again. And guess what? They didn't do it again.
Of course, I take it back. Donald Trump was and is not unhinged. In fact, he's a very stable genius, let's not forget. And we've only got a couple of seconds to go. Mike Parry is a stable genius as well, by the way. Robert, what's the message, Robert Fox from the Evening Standard, what's the message you'd like to leave with our viewers about what's happening in Ukraine?
I think it's very difficult to read, because one thing that did go wrong, and I'd like Sebastian's view on this quickly, was how badly the intelligence, not gatherers, but interpreters misread Putin, because Putin said he wasn't going in. There were 2 former British ambassadors to Moscow, Russian speakers and so on, the former head of MI6 saying, no, he's a cautious man, he's a chess player, he won't do it. And he did it, and this is where I disagree with Mike. I think the plan was in the works from, if I have to draw a date, from 2007, when he gave a very firm speech at the Munich Security Conference saying NATO had gone too far. His aim is to push NATO back. And the real message is, and I'm absolutely with Sebastian here, we've got to be a lot tougher, because I think though things are going temporarily quite badly for him in Ukraine, he's going to push further, because he hasn't given up, even in the past month, in saying he wants strategic weapons or forward offensive weapons out of Europe. He wants American offensive weapons out of Europe, which is an extraordinary request. I think he's like Napoleon or Alexander the Great, looking east, looking west. He's living his own reality, and that is what's worrying. And it's no use appeasing him. And I'm afraid in Whitehall, I can't speak for Washington, Sebastian, but in Whitehall there is, let's give him an off-ramp, which means let's play Mr. Nice. No, he has got to be thwarted. Otherwise, we'll be tripping over the tripwire, and there'll be something going wrong in the Baltic states or in Poland by 2 likely sets of candidates, and we will be in a NATO-Russia war.
I agree with you, Robert. Putin is still a relatively young man. We could have 2 more decades of this nightmare. We must stand up to him. Appeasement has failed. Sebastian Gorka, you need to be on air elsewhere very shortly. Final thoughts from you?
I'm always perplexed by this meme or this trope that President Trump is crazy or unpredictable. Really? He did what he promised. America first, no more dumb wars, bring our soldiers home, close the border, and make America great again. I don't see what's crazy. I don't see what's unpredictable. We had a very, very simple message in the White House. Our friends would be treated as friends, and our enemies would be afraid of us. That is what we did for 4 years, and it worked. Our enemies were afraid, and our friends were reassured. That's why we have what is occurring in Europe right now. Never, ever would have happened in a second Trump term. That's why we need him back in the White House, because when America has leadership, the world is a safer place. When Obama was in the White House, rise of ISIS, invasion of Crimea, ballistic missiles over the Sea of Japan. When we came in, it all ended. We destroyed the caliphate of ISIS, the ballistic missile launches stopped, the border was secured, and we killed Qasem Soleimani, the most dangerous terrorist in the world. None of this is crazy. None of it is unpredictable. It is what he promised, and it's what he did. And sadly, right now, we have a feckless, senile old man in the White House. And when that happens, the bad guys make hay.
Sebastian Gorka doesn't do boring either. We have that in common. I recommend his fascinating and highly entertaining political talk show. It's called America First with Sebastian Gorka. Find out more about his show and how to listen to it, www.sebgorka.com. Also, my thanks to one of the most respected journalists in the country, the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, you must come back and see us in the studio very, very shortly. Thanks to my panel as well, who return in a couple of minutes' time. But we've been asking you whether or not Joe Biden should call Donald Trump to get some help with Russia. Well, 68.4% of you say yes. Give him a call. Press the orange button, folks. And 31.6% say no. Well, it's all about opinions. Coming up, friend of the show, Andre Walker, has been to Ukraine this weekend helping with the relief effort. He'll tell us what's happening on the ground. Straight after this, don't forget my Mark Meets guest is the incredible NHS cardiologist Asim Malhotra. He'll help you lose weight, sort out heart disease, diabetes. We'll talk about the vaccine and can the NHS bounce back from the pandemic. Asim Malhotra, live just after 10. We've got alternative news headlines, another game show, and lots more of my amazing panel. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You know how much I think of you. This show is about you and it's about me, and I want to get to know you better. So every Sunday, we're going to do Sunday selfies, and they are flooding in thick and fast. Most of them are fairly decent and broadcastable, I'm pleased to say. This is Fergus. Look at you, you handsome devil, Fergus. Great to have you on board. Also, we've got Ian and Siobhan, another handsome couple. I've got the best audience, haven't I? And how about this, last but not least, gorgeous Karen. Karen, I'm going to blow you a big fat kiss. Do keep those selfies coming. Selfie Sunday, every Sunday night, because I want to get to know you better and I want to put you on the box. Well, let's put somebody else on the box now, because in the early hours of this morning, 35 people were tragically killed at a shipment base on the border of Ukraine near Poland. Andre Walker, a good friend of this show, journalist and political commentator, who was just a few miles from this explosion, has returned from Ukraine earlier today, and he joins us in the studio. Andre, thanks for coming in.
I can't believe that I'm here doing an interview about aid working and running logistics into Ukraine. It's just been an absolute whirlwind. But I will tell you something. I've said on this show and other shows before that I believe that Vladimir Putin was going to lose this war. What I've seen in Ukraine has been absolutely extraordinary. What happens is these large 40-ton Arctic trucks come over, And then the distribution centres that are built and then demolished effectively within 12 hours supply hundreds and hundreds of small vehicles. It's impossible for Vladimir Putin to hit each and every minivan. And so consequently, stuff is flooding over the border. And it's just the information flow, Mark, is unbelievable because the whole war is being run from Signal, from Telegram and from WhatsApp. And Putin last night, when he attempted to hit a distribution centre, and by the way, our guys were not affected by that, but effectively he believes that there is a way that you can take out a commander, take out a building, take out a system that is going to stop all of this. And it's not, it's just people. Can I give you a great example? I was wandering around the border and across various places there were little red arrows pointing to where the refugee centre was. Now, presumably, they didn't have any writing on them. Presumably it was so you could move them upside down.
Yeah,
and turn around.
of course.
Okay. So I turned around and I said, well, hang on a second, how do the refugees know to follow the red arrows? Well, it's because there is so much social media flowing into the country that they can see these very discreet arrows. That's good. And know which way to go.
Echoes of the Arab Spring, in which social media helped that liberation too.
It's absolutely unbelievable. And I think the other thing that I understand now is the way that this is a battle about logistics. You know what people said to me before I went? That armchair generals are interested in strategy, real generals are interested in logistics. This issue that Vladimir Putin has got is just destroying him, where individual people are firing Molotov cocktails at the fuel trucks that the Russians require, and then there is just this weight of stuff coming over. And it would be just bizarre. So literally, somebody would say, oh, we've got a guy in Azov who needs flak jackets. The little car will show up. I'm not noting the number plate, put the stuff in, and then they go off. And just hundreds, thousands of people streaming stuff across the border. Crazy.
Churchill called war the battle of wills, and the will is there within the Ukrainian people to win.
I'll tell you what I'd call it, to quote Churchill again, or slightly quote Churchill. It's a flotilla of small vehicles, and it's a flotilla of people. So somebody said to me, Andre, are you actually working for the Ukrainian military on logistics? Actually, it's all indivisible now. The reality is, ordinary blokes picking up food are supplying both the military and ordinary people. I'll tell you what is soul-destroying, and we can see some of the pictures of stuff being delivered. Yeah. What is absolutely soul-destroying is to see families without their dads. You're a father yourself. Correct. The idea that your wife and kids will come over, and there is a real terror, and this is the bit that really depressed me, about these aid workers, and I'm not slagging off the aid workers, by the way, who meet people at the border. We've not vetted them. Yeah. We don't know. We are sure that there's people traffickers amongst them. And so people are incredibly scared and incredible. But I'll tell you the other thing about refugees, and I know this is mad to say, but the big difference between a refugee and you is that they're refugees, right? So you always imagine people being sort of huddled together and sort of, lost this and lost that. One night we were in the pub with them, right? Another day, we had 3 young 15-year-old guys moving boxes and whatever. They're Ukrainian kids too young to be in the military. People turn up in their ordinary cars. Some people have got Mercs, some people have got Renault Clios, but actually they're not a different breed to you and I. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. All bets are off in terms of who gets caught up in this war and who, as you say, is defined as a refugee. It's heroic what you've done. You've been very brave. You've given up your time. You've put yourself in physical peril. Thank you for those exclusive images that you've been filming on your smartphone. Quite the war reporter, aren't you?
Do you know something? I now feel really embarrassed about saying that I've done something good, because when you see the guys who are driving through machine gun fire and artillery fire and all that sort of thing, you just feel like a bit of a plank for just loading up the boxes for them. But I do think that we should be proud as a country, and actually as a world, for the amount that we have donated to Ukraine and the fact that we are winning this war for these guys by ordinary people, thousands of them who watch this, sending in a bit of dried pasta or whatever. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Why did you go, and what did you do when you got there?
OK, first of all, I volunteered to be in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion secretly. But I've got a very good friend of mine who's a Coldstream Guard, and he said, Andre, at 42, with your level of fitness, no military training, can't speak Ukrainian.
Well, I know your body quite well. You've got flat feet for a start. You're short-sighted.
Yeah. So he said, you'll be actively damaging. Not only will you get killed, but you'll get your entire unit killed as well. Look.
Also, you'd be a great hostage.
Yeah, that's right. I'd be a pain. Yes. So for me, What I got asked to do was to go over to help with the logistical supplies and also to document the fact the logistics are open. Because remember something about Zelensky. He is now saying that the reason that the SWIFT banking system was abolished for the Russians was because they won the first night of the Kiev attack against the Russian parachute regiment. They want to say they're open for business. They want to say they're not the Afghan National Army who are leaving stuff. And more stuff flows in. So from my point of view, what did I actually do? Honestly, Mark, I don't know what I did. The reason is because it's so organic, it's so atomised.
You just got involved, you rolled your sleeves up.
Got involved, so who I supplied, where did they go, what did they do, didn't know. But I will tell you the fundamental point, when people are donating, and I know people are donating who watch this show, when they're donating to these big trucks going to Ukraine, what we're then doing is breaking it up into small vehicles that Putin can't touch.
Can you give us your social media handles so that people can follow what you're up to?
Absolutely.
Because inevitably, I'm sure you'll be going back to the region.
By the way, I was popular in Poland because my name's Andrzej John Paul Walker.
Oh, that would do it.
Oh, they love that.
They were blessing themselves when you walk past.
So it's Andrzej.
The Pope's love child, maybe.
No, it's 1979. So I was born in 79 when he became Pope. So it's Andre, Andre, JP Walker on all social media.
Well, you're a hero for what you've done. You've got many fans on this show, and we look forward to welcoming you back to GB News very soon. Andre Walker there, broadcaster and now war reporter as well. So much more to come.
Aid worker.
Aid worker as well.
Not war reporter, aid worker.
No, he's the new Mother Teresa, let's be honest, without the headgear. Now, let's crack on because we've got lots to get through. More of your Sunday selfies are coming in. You are the most gorgeous lot. Also, we've got my Mark Meets guest, Asim Malhotra, remarkable guy, NHS cardiologist. He'll help you lose weight, reverse your diabetes perhaps, and also just enjoy better overall health. We'll talk about all matters the body with Asim after 10, plus my alternative news headlines, and my brilliant panel as well, and another game show. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Legendary NHS cardiologist Asim Malhotra live in the studio. We're going to talk about the vaccine mandates, and also better metabolic health. How can we lose weight and be healthier? The doc has the answer, plus alternative news headlines, great British game show, and more from my amazing panel. But first, the amazing Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has told Ukraine's president that Vladimir Putin's barbaric actions are testing not just Ukraine, but all of humanity. During a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Prime Minister said the UK would continue to pursue more options to bolster Ukraine's self-defence. Earlier, Mr Zelensky visited wounded soldiers in hospital and presented them with medals. A Russian airstrike has hit a large Ukrainian military base close to Poland, killing at least 35 people and wounding 134. Russia admits to carrying out the attack, which took place less than 15 miles from the Polish border. The Kremlin claims it destroyed a large amount of weapons supplied by outside nations. In the latest round of peace talks, a Russian delegate has said progress has been made and they could soon reach a joint position. A member of the Ukrainian delegation also confirmed there could be results in the coming days. It's not known what the terms of any agreement might include, but Ukraine has said while it's willing to negotiate, it won't surrender or accept ultimatums. Well, it's believed 125,000 people have now been evacuated via humanitarian corridors across Ukraine. Speaking in his latest video address, the Ukrainian president stressed the key task is still Mariupol, where 400,000 people remain trapped. Volodymyr Zelensky also said Ukrainians remain determined to overcome the challenges of Russian aggression.
Russia has lost thousands of items of military equipment. They've lost 74 planes and 86 helicopters. We know they have more, but we also know that we will keep defending. Ukraine is not surrendering. Servicemen are not surrendering. The people are not surrendering.
The government says 21 Ukrainian children with cancer have landed in England to receive life-saving treatment at NHS hospitals. Meanwhile, anyone who opens up their home to Ukrainian refugees for at least 6 months rent-free will be given £350 a month as a thank you payment from the government. Those offering accommodation will be vetted and applicants will face security checks. And leading actors have shown their support for Ukraine at the BAFTA Film Awards in London. Benedict Cumberbatch was among those wearing a badge or bow in blue and yellow, the colours of the country's flag. The actor who stars in The Power of the Dog, which won Best Film, also hinted he'd be willing to welcome a refugee into his home. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get straight back to Mark Dolan tonight.
It's time now for my alternative news headlines, and let's kick off with the news that Donald Trump loves being the DJ at his golf resort Mar-a-Lago in Florida. And apparently his favourite song is YMCA. I'm surprised that yellow hard hat doesn't interfere with his hair. Well, it got us to thinking here on Mark Dolan tonight, what other pop hits might ex-President Donald Trump be a fan of? So here goes. I'm Still Standing in 2024. Another brick in the wall, and we'll get Mexico to build it. That Bob Dylan classic, Blow Drying in the Wind. A Whiter Shade of Orange. Strawberry Blonde Fields Forever. Yeah, what a classic. Make American Pie Great Again. And this one will always bring a tear to your eye. China seems to be the hardest word. China. China. Vladimir Putin's appalling invasion of Ukraine continues, but could peace be in the offing? The Kremlin has said it would stop the war if Ukraine ceased military action, enshrined in its constitution that it had no plans to join NATO, gave up annexed Crimea and recognised the separatist regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. It also added that Vladimir Putin would like a third series of The Office, starring Ricky Gervais. He'd also like a full Chelsea strip, an Oasis reunion. Come on, lads, make it happen. And last but not least, Putin wants the biggest desk you can get from DFS. Let's hope they've got a sale on. The government's exams body, Ofqual, has advised that schools can use special considerations to help pupils suffering from exam anxiety. That's right, exam anxiety, including sitting papers at different times or in a nicer environment. Crazy. I remember the good old days when you had exam anxiety because you were thick. Why do you think I haven't got a proper job? A Russian court has ruled the trademark for Peppa Pig can be ignored as the Kremlin condemn restrictive Western measures. It's feared the legendary kids' character will now be exploited by copycats and cheap rip-offs. Well, exclusively here on Mark Dolan tonight, we can report that Peppa Pig is not happy. We've got this strongly worded statement, and it reads as follows: oink, 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 oink. Harsh words. Sir Rod Stewart has had to fill the potholes on his street after the council ignored the problem. The rock superstar complained, "I can't get my Ferrari through here at all." Once he's done that, he'll deal with the low-hanging branches interfering with his famous hairdo. Back to Russia now, and the Sunday press are reporting that Vladimir Putin is suffering from something called roid rage. That's right, roid rage, from steroid treatment for cancer. Western spies believe his increasingly erratic behaviour, bloated appearance and extreme social distancing for visitors is caused by medical treatment. Look, I know we're at war and we hate the guy, but perhaps here in the West we should show some compassion and send him some medicine. A couple of grams of Novichok should do the trick. You'll find some in Salisbury. My mother swears by it. The Spice Girls are in talks to headline Glastonbury for the last show of their world tour in 2023. And here on Mark Dolan tonight, we have exclusive access to their show rider. That's their demands for backstage. It includes a family pack of Werther's Originals and comfortable shoes. And finally, great news, folks. One of my favourite people, fitness and healthcare expert Joe Wicks, is expecting his third child with his lovely wife, Rosie. Apparently, the baby is already kicking and doing squats, pull-ups and crunches. And those are your alternative news headlines. I want to get to know you better, and therefore I've been asking for selfies. We're going to do this every Sunday, Selfie Sunday, and this is Sarah and... Is that right? Ewan? Brilliant, Sarah and Ewan. Oh, no, let's get rid of the banner. We don't want to lose Sarah. Sarah and Ewan, what a very fine couple. They managed to squeeze me into that image as well. That's quite the threesome. Sarah and Ewan, thank you for that. How about Steve? Hashtag legend. Look at you. That's a rather large desk. That's bigger than Vladimir Putin's, Steve. And what about those balloons? Are you celebrating? Thank you for that, lovely man. And how about Janet's doggy, who's watching my show in quite an erotic way, I've got to say. Janet, I'm flattered. You've got a gorgeous hound, and thank you for sharing that picture with me. We'll get more of those selfies in. Any we don't get to tonight, we'll do them next Sunday. We won't waste, I should say, a single one of your wonderful pictures. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, academia and beyond, plus those who simply have a big story to tell. Tonight, renowned NHS-trained cardiologist Dr. Asim Malhotra, campaigner, best-selling author and chair of Public Health Collaboration, a charity dedicated to informing and implementing healthy decisions. Asim is a globally regarded specialist when it comes to diagnosing, preventing and managing heart disease. His areas of expertise include evidence-based medicine. Do you remember that? Do you remember evidence-based medicine? Collaborative shared decision-making with patients, obesity, coronary artery disease, preventative cardiology, as well as angina. Dr. Malhotra graduated with a degree in medicine from the University of Edinburgh in 2001. He was shortlisted in the Sunday Times Debrett's list as one of the most influential individuals in the UK in the fields of science and medicine, a list which also included Professor Stephen Hawking. He says that he's on a mission to save lives 1 million at a time. Well, he is 1 in a million, and he joins us now. Hello, Asim.
Hi, Mark.
The doctor will see you now.
Great to see you.
Look, it's great to have you in the studio. What has the pandemic taught us about public health?
Well, it's a great question, Mark. I think it's exposed really the failure of public health, if you like, for a very long time to tackle chronic disease, because I think, as most people know now, once you take away the frail elderly, most of the risk from COVID-19, I even wrote a book about it, is related to diseases of lifestyle, excess body fat, and something that was highlighted on on this program not so long ago was that when you look at people who died just purely of COVID, it was about 10% of the total deaths that were, that we suffered from in this country. And what that means is most of those people that died had some underlying condition, and most of those conditions are related to excess body fat being driven by poor diet. And what we had was really a fast pandemic, which exploited a slow pandemic of chronic disease, which we failed to tackle for many years.
If we didn't have obesity, if we didn't have collectively as a nation a high BMI, how bad might the pandemic have been?
So I would actually take it a little bit further, because BMI is a little bit outdated, Mark, in the sense that...
Is it a blunt tool?
It's very blunt. I think, so in this country, just to give you, just to remind the public of the statistics, which are still pretty shocking, more than 60% of adults in the UK are overweight or obese. More than 1 in 3 children by the time they leave primary school are in the same category. But beyond that, when we look at excess body fat that's harmful to health, that even affects people who have a normal BMI, that probably, we take that estimate up to about 80% of UK adults now having excess body fat that is a risk to their health. Yeah. So really that's the major issue that's been at the heart of this. And to answer your question about how many more lives could have been essentially saved or deaths prevented, one estimate suggested about 50% of the lives would have been saved from COVID if we had healthier lifestyles. I suspect it's probably more than that.
And we saw it, didn't we, even in the cabinet? I know it's not a scientific sample, but the poor old Prime Minister, and our heart went out to him at the time. I was on national radio when he went into ICU on a Sunday night. But Boris Johnson is pretty stout gentleman. He gets COVID, it almost kills him. The rest of the cabinet get it, and it's like a nasty flu, nothing worse.
Yeah, absolutely. We've known for a long time, even before COVID, that excess body fat, for example, people who get flu are more likely to have severe illness, they carry the virus for longer. People with type 2 diabetes, high blood glucose, for example, viruses and bacteria thrive off high blood glucose. So in some ways, it was kind of predictable that we were going to have bad outcomes. And globally, Mark, as well, 90% of all the deaths that occurred from COVID happened in countries where more than 50% of the population were overweight or obese.
So we know about obesity and we know about type 2 diabetes. You use this expression, metabolic health, as an umbrella term for how sick we are in the West and the developed world. So what is metabolic syndrome?
So metabolic health is really, in very simple terms, a way of understanding the balance in the body between storing fat for energy and burning it. And if that goes out of balance, then you are at risk of having poor metabolic health. And there are 5 main markers which are really simple to measure. So, it incorporates blood pressure, whether you're a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, increased waist circumference, and then an abnormal cholesterol profile. One of the things that's quite a crude, easy thing for people to measure at home to tell whether they are potentially at adverse metabolic health is looking at their waist circumference and their height. And your waist circumference should be less than half of your height. And if it's more than half of your height, then you're probably heading down the wrong direction in terms of your health.
And the existence of a belly, which happens to all of us in middle age, that is actually a red flag. Is it? Do you think in society we rather underplay being overweight and we dress well to accommodate it? Is that a problem?
I think so, yeah. And also it's become more normalised, Mark, hasn't it? Because so many people are suffering with this problem. It's become normalised. So I think we need to really tackle it at the
We've seen a lot of newspaper reports about people very sadly in COVID, in ICU or even dying, being described as a healthy middle-aged man. That essentially is, yields to the worst of COVID. But you might question how healthy they were.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to know for sure. I'm sure I know people very healthy and very fit who have suffered badly from COVID. But in general, Mark, the likelihood is that they're going to have poor metabolic health. Now, one of the problems, and something I've campaigned on, is it's not part of the conversation that goes on in community within GPs and practices, in secondary care. But actually, that's what we should be focusing on, because metabolic health, is linked to, ultimately, it's the metabolic syndrome, which is having 3 of those 5 markers in the abnormal range, is the most important risk factor for heart attacks. It's likely, it drives type 2 diabetes. It's likely, a big driver of cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia. All of these conditions are rooted in poor metabolic health. So if we sort metabolic health out through lifestyle changes, then we are going to be in a much better position.
Well, that's the amazing thing. You've written lots of books about it, including the best-selling Piopi diet. And you, even though you're a cardiologist and you're willing to prescribe medication to patients that need it, you think prevention is better than cure, and you believe that diet is very powerful, a powerful lever to pull, the ultimate lever. So how do we fix that belly fat, the poor metabolic health, obesity? What can my viewers do, especially if they feel that they've piled on the pounds in lockdown, which many of us have?
Yeah. The good news is these metabolic health markers can be improved quite rapidly, within weeks to a few months of just changing diet alone. I mean, the other factors are, of course, really important, making sure you're reasonably active and getting enough sleep. But dietary change alone is the only intervention that's shown to reverse metabolic syndrome, the worst aspect of metabolic health, in up to 50% of people within 21 to 28 days. So what do you do?
Less than a month?
Absolutely. And this is what I do this with my
And you
patients.
don't believe in calorie counting or starving yourself. So
Granny wasn't counting calories, Mark.
No.
We didn't have
And
this,
she wasn't
the
fat.
50s and 60s. People weren't counting calories. What's driving this is something in the environment, and it's in the food environment. And the biggest culprit are what we call ultra-processed foods.
Yeah.
So these are industrially, produced products that are essentially normally 5 or more ingredients, come in a packet, unhealthy oils, sugars, and when they're combined together, these sorts of ingredients, they become hyperpalatable, so they're
designed to be delicious and addictive, aren't they?
Absolutely. And addiction's the opposite of free will. So the food industry have very cleverly engineered these products to get people hooked. They make lots of money. We get addicted, and then you've got an obesity epidemic.
So what's in and what's out? Sugar's out.
Yep.
And processed food, so anything in a box with 1 million ingredients.
Yeah, so listen, very simple. I tell my patients, 5 or more ingredients, if you pick up anything, even packaged bread, if it's got 5 or more ingredients, don't eat it.
Right.
Okay?
Well, that's good, because beer's only got about 3 or 4. So.
Yeah, beer's not included.
The doctor's not happy.
And low quality carbohydrates. So these are essentially your breads, your pastas, your rice, your potatoes in excess. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with having these as the occasional treat, but when you're already in this cycle of poor metabolic health, you need to go quite extreme at the beginning to sort of recalibrate.
Yeah.
And then you can, I then say once you've got to your optimum metabolic health that you can, then I'd say follow the 80-20 rule, which is what I do. 80% of the time you're pretty strict with your diet, and then you can, of course, enjoy the occasional treat. The problem is the occasional treat has now become part of the regular daily diet of the British public. And, more than 50% of the calories consumed in this country are from ultra-processed foods.
So we're not having processed foods, stuff in a box, more than 5 ingredients, those starchy carbohydrates, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these are basic carbs that like fibre.
And although fruit's okay, those tropical fruits are a bit tricky, right? Grapes.
Yeah, well, it depends where you're starting from, but in general, if people have, which again, most people in this country are going to be in this category, you want to really try and go for the low sugar fruits, your berries, that kind of stuff.
So what are we eating then? We're eating meat, fish?
Whole foods. Whole foods, absolutely.
Okay.
Meat, fish, eggs, nuts and seeds, vegetables, whole fruit, low sugar fruits ideally. All enjoyable stuff.
Are you able to stick around?
Yeah.
Over the break, because I'd love to continue this conversation, and I'd love to bring our panel in as well, who are fascinated by health. And you're going to talk to Mike Parry, who, by the way, is a walking miracle. And he's got a big heart. He's got a lion heart, and he's had heart issues, so I'm sure he'd love to engage with this conversation. So let's do that. We're going to talk after the break. Zoe's been very kind and allotted us a couple more minutes on this, because we'll talk about the influence of big pharma on the NHS and our politics, and even perhaps the media as well. We'll talk about vaccine mandates. And we'll also look at high-profile stories about people who are ill. What is the context to that? You won't want to miss what will be a very lively conversation. Professor Asim Malhotra, sorry, he's a doctor. I've just upgraded him to professor. He's a professor to me. Professor of common sense. Dr. Asim Malhotra is still with us in the studio. You see, I'll get the hang of this telly work. Let's get to your Sunday selfies after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
I'm delighted to welcome back to the studio Dr. Asim Malhotra. We'll, by the way, have to plug Asim's latest book. So, Zoe, do you mind chucking that onto the prompter for me before we finish our chat so that we can read Asim's words of wisdom as well? He is the author of the Piopi Diet that I bought. It's fantastic. He's also the author of A Statin-Free Life, which takes us to the next topic before we bring our panel in. The pharmaceutical industry, they make medication. Are they our best friend or our worst enemy?
Wow, really good question. I think probably the reality, and I'm going to elaborate on this now with you, Mark, probably more the latter. I think they're more like the worst enemy, to be honest. So let's start by just understanding, you mentioned earlier evidence-based medicine. So evidence-based medicine is what we should all be adhering to do as doctors. And there's an elegant triad that was created by the founding father of the evidence-based medicine movement, Professor David Sackett, about 25 years ago. And what it does is it incorporates your individual clinical expertise as a doctor and your clinical intuition, best available evidence, and take into consideration patient values and preferences to improve outcomes for patients. What does improve outcomes mean? Relieving suffering and pain, treating illness, managing risks. Now, the problem is if there's any distortion of any of those components, you are going to ultimately either give useless treatments to patients or cause harm. So the reality, unfortunately, is when you look at best available evidence, it's been corrupted by vested interests. So John Ioannidis, I consider him to be a kind of Stephen Hawking-like figure in medicine, professor of medicine at Stanford. His own analysis a few years ago of 60,000 studies, or published medical studies for therapeutic interventions, revealed only about 7% of them were actually found to be high quality and relevant to patients. He wrote another paper where he explains why most published research findings are false. So what's going on here? Well, at the root of it, I've mentioned this in a talk in European Parliament I gave in 2018. We have an epidemic of misinformed doctors and misinformed patients rooted in biased funding of research. So that's research that's funded because it's likely to be profitable, not beneficial for patients. Biased reporting in medical journals. So in the medical journal, then they exaggerate the benefits of the drug, minimize the harms from what's then come from the drug industry. Biased reporting in the media, commercial conflicts of interest, and last but not least, an inability of doctors to understand and communicate health statistics. When you put that all together, you then create something called a medical misinformation mess, and then patients are ultimately getting drugs where, if they were fully informed, they would likely choose, in many cases, not to take the drug. So what you've got is huge waste. And when you talk about the pharmaceutical industry, you asked about worst enemy. What is their track record? Over the last 30 years, most of the drugs that have been produced have really been proven to be copies of old ones. So they change the molecules here and there, they patent it, make loads of money. By the time someone's figured it out, that they know better than a cheaper drug they could have used, they've moved on to the next drug. One analysis in France, Mark, between 2002 and 2011, looking at all the drugs that had been produced, found that there were twice as many drugs that were proven to be more harmful to patients than ones that were beneficial. And only 0.2% of the drugs that were produced, about 900 plus drugs over 10 years, that were approved by the regulator, only 0.2%, 1 in 500, were found to be actually of therapeutic clinical value of significance. So the net result of what pharma have been doing, they keep talking about innovation and blockbusters and advances in medical science. It's, unfortunately, the reality is this, Mark. The business model of the pharmaceutical industry, in many cases, is one of fraud.
And I guess the issue is that doctors are therefore not asking the simple questions, which is, does the patient need this medication? Will it work? And is it worth any potential side effects?
Yeah, exactly, Mark. So I think, Carl Hennigan is the director of the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford, as you may know.
Yeah.
And he actually describes it very eloquently. He says that every doctor, in any intervention you do with a patient, ask yourself, how much difference does it make? And how do I know this? Because once you ask those questions and you dig deep enough, you will then be able to at least have a more honest conversation with the patients about what are the potential harms, what are the uncertainties. I do this with my patients all the time. When I talk about statins, for example, I will say, well, this is a best case scenario. You say you're somebody that doesn't have heart disease, may have a few risk factors, but hasn't had established heart disease, then I will say to them, listen, if you take this drug religiously every day for 5 years, based upon industry-sponsored trials, where the raw data has not been released for independent scrutiny, so likely best case scenario, there's a 1% chance, Mark, that it will prevent you having a heart attack, but it will not prolong your life by 1 day.
And there could be side effects.
And of course, that's before we even talk about side effects.
Because, this is your area of expertise. Of course, many will be watching and they feel that they owe their lives to certain medications. And I guess we should point that out. We shouldn't tar the whole industry with the same brush. But you know your stuff about cardiology and about statins. Would you care to tell us your assessment of statins and whether they are necessary or not? Because they're very profitable for the pharmaceutical industry, aren't they? How much money do they make from statins?
Well, I think it's estimated that they've made about $1 trillion. $1
trillion?
From the sale.
It's pretty good. It's got a T in it.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Like with many drugs, Mark, they may benefit a certain group of people, but what the drug industry want to do is they want to expand the use of their drugs to make more money.
Because it's a business model.
Well, the drug industry, people need to realize that they have a legal obligation to produce profit for shareholders. They don't have a legal obligation to give you the best treatment, although most people would believe that to be the case. The real scandal is that medical journals, academic institutions really collude, and doctors collude with industry for financial gain. And that creates, that adds to the whole if you like, the medical misinformation.
Well, it's like
it's institutional corruption.
It's like the dentists. I mean, put it crudely, like the dentists who'll do extractions. Just you don't need the tooth out, but they can make a few £100 from an extraction, and it's a more sort of sophisticated version of that.
Yeah,
and they want to make money. Their product, their commodity is the medication, and they'll do anything to sell it.
Yeah, and Mark, I think it's not about pointing fingers at individuals. I think most doctors want to do the right thing, but they're being given information that is biased. And one of the problems and why we're not tackling this is most doctors are not aware that a lot of the research that drives their clinical decision-making is poor quality and unreliable.
A bit like recent data saying that a good whole grain breakfast is really good for you, except that was sponsored by Kellogg's.
Well, there you go. You
Follow
look
the money.
A lot of the media reporting influences a lot of doctors' decisions.
So before I bring my panel in, it's obviously a business model. When you say people are, that money's involved, people are being bought, how so? How are the pharmaceutical giants actually using money as a leverage into the NHS and the media and politics? How are they doing?
Well, I think they capture different aspects of that system that influences what happens downstream. So, for example, most people probably aren't aware that the regulators, whether it's the FDA or the MHRA over here, can receive considerable money from the very industry they're supposed to be regulating. So there's a big conflict of interest there. And then that questions their independence. Are they being rigorous enough? That's one mechanism. And then, the drug industry there are there to try and, give the best.
And they splash the cash, right? They use money.
Absolutely. They use their
How
money
do they
and
do
their
that?
power.
What do they do? Do they give doctors money?
Well, no, I don't think not directly. No, they don't give doctors money, but I think it's the way they influence they influence the politicians. I mean, in America, it's a bit different over here. They fund campaigns for politicians, so that becomes a huge, considerable amounts of money they give to different, interest groups, political interest groups that then influence legislation, which then means we have less regulation, they're able to get away with more.
Now, we're grateful for the medication that works, and you will concede that some medication works.
No, absolutely.
And it's life-saving. So how do we get the balance right? How do we get control back of this? Of course, we've got the NHS, which is, I guess, a unitary health service. How can we push back, and how do we recalibrate our relationship with Big Pharma? Can it be done? Is it too late?
Listen, I think one of the things that's most important is that we have to adhere to this evidence-based medicine triad, and doctors need to question a little bit more about the evidence base. We need less commercial conflicts of interest. And I think one of the things, Mark, moving forward, given the history of the last 3 decades of what really has been a lot of waste, a lot of unnecessary harm, a lot of unnecessary deaths.
And money spent.
Yeah, I think the drug companies who, obviously we need industry to create new products and new drugs. They shouldn't be allowed to test their own products and then hide the data from the public and from doctors. That's just ludicrous. It's nonsense. If you ask anybody, I have conversations with everybody around this, whether it's the cab driver or the barista in the coffee shop, and I explain this to them and they're shocked. No one would find this acceptable.
No, and that's why GB News is here to actually reveal what's actually going on. Asim's book is called A Statin-Free Life, a revolutionary life plan for tackling heart disease without the use of statins. Well, look, Asim, stick around because we've got my panel here. We've got Mike Parry, Francine Lewis, Francine Lewis, and Albi Amankona. Let's talk about this right now, and let's talk about heart health. Mike Parry, you're a walking miracle. The cardiologist is in the house. The doctor will see you now.
Well, it's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And we had a short chat, actually, before I came on. Doc, you talk about statins and all that. I'll tell you some of the drugs I take to keep my heart in place. Carvedilol, allopurinol, digoxin, avostatin, and recently a very new one which treats both heart disease and diabetes too, which I've also got. I'm a walking disaster. They've kept me alive for the last 20 years. So which of those would you recommend and which wouldn't? And my history, by the way, Doc, is that I was in Harefield Hospital, where I believe you did some of your training. Harefield Hospital, one of the top, cardiological centres in this country and possibly the world. And after waiting something like 4.5 months for a heart transplant. I couldn't wait any longer. My life was disappearing, my career was disappearing, so I left. And I was told that, you know, my chances of survival wouldn't be that good. But I devised my own method of getting better by simply going through exercise. And to this day, I walk 30 miles a week to keep my heart in shape. And I've survived for something like 20 years. That was 2004.
That's amazing. Of course, Mike, there is a good advert for the right medication, I guess. Asim.
Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary story and really well done to you. I mean, it's inspiring. And it reminds me actually of one of my most interesting patients. I've written about him, so, you know, I can give his name. I've written publicly about him. So I saw this chap several years ago. He was a Virgin Atlantic airline pilot, early 50s, and suffered a heart attack, could no longer fly. Luckily, it wasn't mid-flight. But he was well into his, exercise. He was running marathons, but he wasn't eating well. He was overweight. Anyway, he started doing his own research. He was, by background, also a maths and physics teacher, so, you know, pretty smart bloke, and started looking to all the drugs he was prescribed. He was putting a cocktail of drugs after his heart attack, which we normally do, and then started getting side effects, started feeling miserable, started reading the data himself about the individual drugs and how beneficial they were for him, and realizing there was only a small benefit. And then he gradually decided to basically come off all his pills. 5 years later, he's off all his pills. He's breaking his own records in ultramarathons. He changed his diet. He actually decided to go on a ketogenic diet, and that worked really well for him. He lost weight. All his markers are fantastic. And in fact, we did some further imaging on his heart, and it suggests that not only was there no progression in some what we call bystander disease that was picked up the first time, but there's potential reversal. And, I think what's really important is that patients are just fully informed and empowered about what the drugs are doing. And often they're quite surprised when they're told, for example, that a drug that has been blindly prescribed saying you must take this drug. They're quite surprised when somebody else comes along and actually says, well, actually, just so you know, this drug, the chances of this drug benefiting you in terms of, preventing another heart attack or whatever else is about 1 in 100. Now, a lot of patients may decide they want to carry on taking the pill, but many of them say, well, hold on a minute, doc, that doesn't sound very good odds, I don't want to take it. And that's actually when we talk about ethical, evidence-based medical practice, that's at the heart of it, transparent communication of risk and empowering patients. I think from what you've told me, I'm sure the drugs have definitely given you some benefit, but it sounds like, mind over matter, you exercising and doing all those other things, I'm sure must have had a massive impact.
Yeah, and curry night at Wetherspoons on a Thursday has helped, hasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it does. But Doc, actually, funny what you say, I suffer from dilated cardiomyopathy, OK? And I think I'm right in saying that means that the left-hand side of your heart just gets too big, too swollen, and it can't pump the blood around your body properly. When I left and said I don't want a heart transplant, when I started walking 30 miles a week, I went back and saw my doctors. Dr. Nicholas Banner was my cardiologist at Harefield, and I think you've worked with him.
Worked with Nick Banner.
He was amazed that my heart came back in. Wow. Normally speaking, I think I'm right in saying that whilst your liver can recover if you stop drinking, and your brain can recover if you've had, a concussion, your heart doesn't normally repair itself, but mine started repairing itself. Is that remarkable?
Yeah, I mean, it can actually happen. Were you a heavy drinker?
I'm sorry?
Were you a heavy drinker?
That's quite an awkward question. I would actually ask you a lawyer to answer that one, Mike Parry.
No, I'll be absolutely honest. I was a very heavy social drinker.
Yeah.
I worked in journalism and broadcasting, and we finished work at 10:30 in the morning, and we were probably in the pub till 4:30 in the afternoon. In those 7 months that I was in Harefield, not only did I forsake alcohol, as Tommy Shelby said in the Peaky Blinders, but also I lost about 4.5 stone in weight. And
listen, you hit the nail on the head. So alcohol in excess can actually be directly toxic to the myocardium, to the heart muscle. But, and I've managed many, many patients like this, when they stop drinking, a significant proportion of them will find their heart muscle, the dilated heart actually reduces in size and starts pumping better. So I suspect you're actually, from what you said to me, it sounds like what you did with your lifestyle has probably had the biggest impact.
Well, honestly, Mike, you know that I'm your #1 fan. I'm such an admirer of you as a person and your career, and I'm so happy that you've survived against the odds. And now, look at you, the picture of health. Let's talk, if we can, Mike, Francine, Albie, and of course, Asim, about the vaccine. Can we have that conversation? I'm very pro-vaccine. I'm triple vaxxed. I'm delighted that it has arrived. It clearly is identified with the reduction of severe illness and death. I'm happy to debate that, but that seems to be the thrust of it. But Asim, in my view, many proportions of the population just don't require it. What's your view?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's what the debate that's been ongoing is. Just like with lockdowns, you know, there's been this whole issue. We should have protected the vulnerable. Did we need to lock down everybody? And we didn't. We failed to protect the vulnerable, and many people died. I think a similar question needs to be asked about the vaccine. I think we know that the people most vulnerable from dying from COVID were elderly, frail people. And you're right. I think the data does show, certainly from prevention of serious illness and death from COVID, the data is in the direction of the vaccine helping prevent that. Having said that, the original randomized control trial from Pfizer, that 6-month trial didn't show any significant reduction in death or from COVID death. So it's a little bit, there's a bit of a discrepancy there, but doesn't mean to say that the vaccine hasn't had a benefit. So I think...
and that's where, if you're in a vulnerable group, based upon what you were saying earlier about evidence-based medicine, you're like, look, you're 78, you're very overweight, you've got asthma, probably worth giving that vaccine
Absolutely.
a go.
I think the only problem, Mark, with this, and this is what's going to unfold over the next several months, is that the raw data on the trial, and when it's specifically about harms, was not available. And it started to be released. It's going to probably take several months before we get all of that data to try and look at the potential harms. And then we'll be able to have a more informed discussion about whether, to what degree, who's going to benefit most from the vaccine and who is more likely to be harmed. That's something that we always, with every drug that we use in medicine, we have to think about. Just on an extreme level, just for people to understand this, if you've got, say, a type 1 diabetic who's got very high blood glucose, is very sick, insulin, a certain dose of insulin is going to save that person's life. If they don't get it, they're going to die. If you gave that same dose of insulin, Mark, to a healthy person, it would kill them. So we have to think a little bit more in a nuanced way about understanding where the benefit and risks
You're
are.
the doctor. I don't understand why people are being pressurised into having a vaccine if they're not in a group that's risking death or severe illness. I don't understand why. Well, can you help me with that?
Yeah,
I'm not a medic.
So I think things have evolved, and I've also got to declare, Mark, I had the vaccine as well at the very beginning. I was one of the earliest people to have it because I helped in a vaccine centre. And I did it not because I felt I was at particular risk. I was able to assess that my risk from serious illness and death from COVID is very, very low. Was because at the time, and I think most people felt that was the case, like with other vaccines, it would prevent me passing it on to vulnerable people, and that was for me a reasonable reason to take it. Now the situation has evolved. We've got more information, more data. Certainly with Omicron, it suggests it doesn't prevent any infection. So it doesn't prevent. It doesn't prevent infection. It may prevent serious illness and death, but it doesn't certainly prevent transmission. Then it becomes an individual choice. Like with statins. Is this, am I having this information on the drug? Explain to me properly, and then I'm making a choice. So the mandates issue for me was very, very bizarre. It didn't make any sense. And my own interpretation of the mandates were the only people to benefit from the mandates were the drug industry. From my perspective, the only people to benefit from mandates.
Calling a spade, is that what's driving this desire to get every man, woman and child vaccinated, including against the advice of the JCVI in relation to 12 to 15-year-olds? Is it back to that conversation about Big Pharma and making money rather than public health?
Listen, I think it's a legitimate question. And I think given the history, what we've talked about already, the history of pharma, these are companies, many of these companies, without singling out one particular company, have been found guilty of criminal activities between 2009 and 2014. Most of the major pharmaceutical companies paid fines totaling about $13 billion for hiding data on harms, misleading doctors. The BMJ wrote an editorial on this, and they said few changes in the system have occurred to stop these problems happening again. So there's a crisis of trust. There's a legitimate crisis of trust, and therefore, getting access to all the data to understand what's going on, to explain what the true harms are really important. And of course, this vaccine was rolled out under emergency use authorization. Traditional vaccines, I'm a huge fan of vaccines. I mean, vaccines are estimated to save about 6 million lives a year. We're talking about whether it's MMR or polio, smallpox, all of those vaccines have been truly remarkable achievements in modern medicine. But, most of those vaccines took at least 10 years to be developed for safety checks. We haven't had the time. Now, I understand why we're in this pandemic crisis.
But that's why you can't mandate
Absolutely.
for people, especially. Well, you shouldn't mandate for anyone, should you? Because it creates vaccine hesitancy. And also, it just goes against that Hippocratic oath.
Yeah, we don't mandate the other vaccines. We haven't traditionally mandated for the whole population for the other vaccines. So through persuasion.
Against the diseases that kill many people.
Absolutely.
Of all age groups. So, I mean, do you feel you've covered that? Because my last question to you, you are a cardiologist. I want to ask you, on the internet, are they just conspiracy theorists? People talking about, sports stars, footballers, people in stadia collapsing all the time, having heart attacks. Are we putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5? Shane Warne, what a sporting legend he is, dies at the age of 55 from a massive heart attack. What do we do with stories like that?
Yeah, on the Shane Warne issue, Mark, I mean, for me, it's affected many people. For me personally, he was one of my greatest sporting heroes. At one stage in my life, I had to make a decision between pursuing a career in cricket or medicine. I played quite a high level. I was actually inspired by Shane Warne to become a leg spinner. I was a successful leg spinner. Wow. I was gutted when I heard that news, absolutely gutted. And the first thing as a cardiologist, you try and look at, well, hold on a minute, what are the risk factors here? This is my area of expertise, coronary artery disease. They said he had a sudden cardiac death from a heart attack. I was reading an interview by one of his close friends just the other day, and he said, and if this is correct, he had no risk factors. This is a mystery. What happened here? Now, of course, on the internet, people have asked the question, is Shane Warne's death in any way linked to the vaccine? Well, first of all, we know he had the vaccine. We also know he had COVID about 6 months ago, and he was quite sick with COVID. Now, COVID has also been linked to heart attacks, but usually the COVID situation, which you knew about, is in the acute phase, when people are in hospital. To be honest, any infection can trigger a heart attack. Pneumonia, body's under stress, it can trigger a heart attack with someone who's already got underlying heart disease. So that's something I've managed, that's well known. 6 months later, I think it's much less likely. He would have had heart scans, that kind of thing. And the question then is there any link between the vaccine and cardiac arrest? And unfortunately, there does seem to be a link. We don't know how strong that link is because Pfizer's own documents released recently on possible side effects, cardiac arrest was one of them. The original New England Journal of Medicine clinical trial, and I looked at the supplementary appendix in there were 4 cardiac arrests in the vaccine group and 1 in the placebo. Now, still small numbers in absolute terms, but if this is a genuine signal, then I think it would be naive, and as a cardiologist, I've got to be honest, I think that, people need to, I think that the vaccine may well have played a role. It certainly has to be part of the differential diagnosis in Shane Warne's death, and that if that's the case, that's tragic.
Doc, sorry, Mark, may I just come in there?
Very briefly, Mike, we've only got a couple of seconds. Go for it.
Doc, also, Shane Warne had been on a 14-day liquid-only diet, hadn't he? Doesn't that also affect the function of the heart?
Yeah, it's unlikely, to be honest. I think people do crash dieting all the time. I mean, it's something I've researched as well, looked into. So crash dieting up and down over many, many years can increase risks. But he didn't have any risk factors, so he wasn't a diabetic as far as we know. He didn't have high blood pressure. If the liquid diet itself was causing a problem, it would have come out.
Well, look, I think it's very important to have these conversations, to ask these questions. I can't stress enough that I'm triple vaccinated. The government are 100% clear, as are the government's medical advisors, that the vaccine is incredibly safe for those groups to whom it is available. So if you're in any doubt, speak to your GP, do your due diligence. But here at GB News and on this show, we're going to have honest conversations. And I think surely the fix for all of this is freedom of choice. If you're worried about possible side effects, then it's got to be your choice whether to get jabbed, which I've been saying since the vaccine came out. So much more to come. My thanks to Dr. Asim Malhotra, author of A Statin-Free Life, a revolutionary life plan for tackling heart disease without the use of statins. Game show next.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's time now to play the Great British Game Show. Our own panellist, Francine Lewis, has written an amazing book.
Wow.
It's called I Play. It's already a bestseller. It's winning rave reviews. Highly recommended. 5 stars, says Mark Dolan from GB News. Well, it's inspired tonight's Great British Game Show. Yes, indeed. In my Great British Game Show tonight, my panel will be guessing the authors of 8 other classic children's books alongside this one. Start with your first book. Who is the author of this one?
Cat in the
Hat.
It's not Enid Blyton.
Oh.
Not Enid Blyton. Zoe, you've got the answer for my ear, haven't you? Let's reveal all. Yes, it's Dr. Seuss. Absolutely right.
I
knew it. A classic. How about our next kids' book? Let's have a
Right.
look at our next classic.
Okay.
Here it comes. Who wrote Oliver Twist?
Charles Dickens.
Well done.
Well
Point to go to
done.
Mike Parry.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yep.
Reminds you of your early childhood, that one?
Well, I love Dickens' books. You know, Oliver Twist was my favourite.
Genius.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
next up, kids' classic. The famous five, written
Enid
by
Blyton.
Blyton.
Enid
Oh, he's good at this, isn't
Oh, he's
he?
on it. We've got some more contemporary ones as well. Keep them coming, guys. Next book. Hungry Caterpillar, written by
A bloke who died about 6 months ago.
Let's have a look. Let's
I've
reveal
read
all.
that so many times.
Yes, Eric Carle.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, what have we got? Our next classic book. James and the Giant
Roald
Peach.
Dahl.
Roald Dahl.
Oh, yes.
Hey.
Roald Dahl.
Top one.
How about this classic? Let's have another one.
Yeah.
Where the Wild Things Are. Written by? From the United States. Let's take a look. Maurice Sendak. Became a brilliant movie.
Right.
I'm
Okay,
useless
let's
at
take one
this.
more. Zoe, should we do some selfies before we go? The tiger who came to tea.
Oh, I love this book as well.
That's a woman from the northeast of England who died recently.
Let's have a look. Let's reveal all. It's Judith Kerr.
Thank you.
Absolute genius.
Yeah.
Well, just enough time to do a couple more Sunday selfies. We've been flooded with them. We'll do more next Sunday. I'll keep the ones that you sent me for next week. So don't worry if you missed out. Take a look at some of my gorgeous viewers. I'm so excited. mark@gbnews.uk has been our email. Here comes a selfie. And it's Darren. There you go, Dazzler. He's meeting some of our stars here at GB News and on the set of Free Speech Nation. This is Ash, lovely Ash as well, another GB News fan. And then let's finish with, oh my God, I can't believe it. That's X-rated.
Oh, look.
And who's that? Hazel and Andy? Lovely, Andy and Aslin. Thank you so much for kissing me on both cheeks. I've never felt so loved. We're out of time. Thanks for your company. Brilliant panel, the best audience. Of course, I'm back at 9 o'clock on Friday, but stick around because I'm in the hot seat for headliners. See you after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are